For more than a century, Barton Springs Pool has been known to Austin, Texas's residents as the soul of Austin. Its cool, refreshing waters have relieved generations from the summer heat. But on January 19, 2003, the pool closed. Local media said it was being polluted by a nearby landfill. In order to address these claims, the city closed Barton Springs during a 90-day investigation. Hear from 3 key participants about their findings, the successful remedy, and how it affected people across the nation. Welcome to you guys for coming today. We're 20 years after the reopening of Barton Springs Pool, and the 3 of you gentlemen all had a part in that. But I thought before we get into the details of that, why don't you just give a sense of what your primary background is and how many years you've had at the city?
Sure, I'll go. My name is Mateo Scoggins, and I'm a biologist. I'm a stream aquatic biologist, and I've been an environmental scientist with the city, with this department, as if it were, for 30 years this summer.
Okay, Oscar Garza. I have been with the city almost 30 years now, and in my capacity with the city, I have basically been a pollution investigator, water pollution investigator. And so that's what I've done, for the past 30 years, just in a regulatory capacity, and just going after polluters, trying to make them accountable, and in some cases bring folks to court and get them fined and stuff like that.
How about you, David?
My name's David Johns. I'm a former city employee. I worked for the city for 31 years before I retired. Geologist by training. A lot of my work at the city was related to Barton Springs, and so many things related to Barton Springs from here on south to San Marcos.
We're here to talk about the reopening of the pool, but it's a long, complicated story. And each one of you had a different kind of role to play in that. And David and I were talking about earlier that actually began well before the Statesman article. It actually started several months prior to that. So tell me what those early days, like when the theory of this could be coming from pavement sealants, and tell me about those early days.
There was a long time when we didn't know it was coming from pavement sealants. Do you want to hear about that part too?
Sure.
So my memory, and it was definitely more than months, it was probably a year or 2 before the Statesman story broke, we started seeing high levels of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons in urban sediments around town. High enough that we were like, this seems a little weird. We should talk to some people who know a little bit more about this. And the reason that we knew they were high is because the city of Austin has done a lot more kind of monitoring of our streams and the sediments in our streams than most municipalities do. So we had data from all different places, not just from our big river, but from our tributary system that feeds into that. And we were seeing numbers in the tributaries that were unexplainable by kind of traditional pathways or sources. Right. So I think David and Nancy McClintock, who was kind of our division manager at the time, started thinking we should go talk to the USGS about this. So we connected with Barb Mahler and Pete Van Meter, and asked if we could give them some data that they could look at and give us some feedback. David, you want to tell the story? I think it's really funny.
Well, they had experience, Pete and Barb, looking at data from all over the country, and they looked at some of these numbers, and they were shocked. I mean, the numbers were astronomical.
They're like, your equipment is broken.
Yeah. This is, things are broken. You're collecting, you have bad data, you have bad lab data, bad collection methods, something. You're doing something wrong, because you shouldn't be seeing this kind of data in any kind of urban setting.
And we said, well, we went back to our labs and we got the QC data, and we said, no, actually, we think this is actually what we're seeing. It's consistent. We've seen it more than one time. It's replicated. So they said, all right, well, why don't we try to do some sampling and send us, if you have any. I think we sent them some samples.
Yeah, we sent them some of our data, some of our samples.
Our samples.
Right.
And they called us up and they said, what the hell did you send us? You just like gummed up all our equipment. We can't even, it's broken. We can't even use our equipment anymore. So we're like, this is just sediments from our creeks. So that's got their attention. And they started asking, well, what's going on? Where are these coming from? At that point, we started talking about sources and we started talking about places in the city. And that kind of opened the door to Tom Bashara's kind of observation of pavement sealants.
Right. Just upstream here at the infamous Pink Apartments, right?
Yep, the one's right up there.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I can kind of pick it up there, mentioning Tom Bashara, that all that was going on for, like you said, about a year or so. And then my understanding, some of the sample collection was made upstream from here.
Upstream
and then kind of narrowed it down to some tributaries upstream here. And then at that point, it was kind of handed over to our group as investigators to try to find out what was, what could be the possible source. And so that's when Tom Bashara, my colleague, and I went, walking up the creek, walking up the stream here, and just trying to look for what was going on. Who's dumping,
Who's dumping waste?
Yeah, who's dumping, big barrels of oil or something. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And so we went up there. We went up the stream there, kind of kicked around there for about a week or so. And Tom Bashara was the one that walked up the tributary there with one of the ones that had the highest hits. So it's like it's coming from here, somewhere. And we're walking around the parking lot, and it was like, well, there's nothing here. There's an apartment and there's a parking lot. Right. Tom being Tom, started kind of scratching the surface there, and we noticed that it was a nice, really luster black, color of, they had just sprayed, the sealant on the parking lot. And it was getting loose, it was getting all powdery and stuff like that. And he kind of reached over, grabbed some of it, and he said, I think this might be it. Something.
He had worked in the construction industry before he got in. So he'd heard of pavement sealant, knew that it was a thing that were put around. And then at that point, we didn't take a sample at that point. He went to Home Depot and started looking at MSDSs, or what do they call them now? SDSs.
Yeah, right.
And started saying, some of these have this coal tar sealant in them. And then he did a little research on them and realized, these have a really high concentration of pH.
Mm-hmm. And I remember also that, so, when he was thinking about that, I was skeptical about it myself. At the beginning, I was like, well, how could that be? What components did it? I didn't know what the components were that it had. We went and met with Nancy and some other folks, Nancy McClintock, who was the division manager, and sat around and said, we think this is what it is. And, everybody kind of shook their head. It was like, no, that's not it. Don't worry about it. This ain't it. Just go back and go look for something else, because this ain't it. And, again, just with the persistence of Tom Bashara, he just kind of went to Home Depot, looked at the product, looked at what the components were, and, compared it to the sample results and said, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
What this product has is what y'all are getting in your samples. And that kind of slowly started the ball rolling. It wasn't like, it was like, well, we'll kind of look at it, but, we think it might be something else.
It was a lot of skepticism at the time.
And it's the other thing we had to add to that skepticism. In the year 2000, the USGS, Barb and Pete, published a paper saying they theorized that the increased PAHs in Lady Bird Lake were coming from automobile traffic. So we already had a working theory that it was increased population, more car trips, more,
an increase that went along with population.
Yeah, so we already had that theory out there. So it was, we had a narrative already.
The kind of interesting turn to this whole thing was that this was all going on when the Statesman did that public information request and asked us for, and I can't remember why, but I
don't remember why they were getting on that trail.
They got on the sediment concentrations.
But I remember the open records request, and since it was I think we had collected a sample from Barton Springs from the sediment in the pool, and the sediment in the pool came back sort of high, but not as high as some of these tributaries. And so the open records request related to Barton Springs came to me, and it basically said, well, we need everything that you have related to Barton Springs. And I'd been at the city about 15 years at the time. I was like, well, that's like all of my files. You know? I think that's pretty unreasonable to try and do. And I remember we met with a reporter to try and narrow down what it is that he was interested in doing. And, you know, at that point, kind of got a feel for, man, where's this guy coming from?
Yeah.
You know, it was really kind of, you didn't really want to talk and hear what we had to say. He really seemed like he had an agenda.
Yeah.
He really had kind of a preconceived notion of what he was looking for. You know, we did get a more narrowed open records request that he could look at, but it was still pretty voluminous. And to me, that was an early indication of, you know, there's something amiss here, that there's somebody's looking for a story that's not the same story that we're trying to tell.
Right.
Because we'd already started at that point, I think, talking to the state about these values, and we already had that, like Oscar said, it was still soft, but we think this pavement sealant might be a really important deal before the story came out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's also in I think perhaps in that August of 2002 Statesman article, talks about, you know, the issue of one of the temp workers here for Watershed had a rash. And there was that whole track down of the rash.
Maybe that was the first exposure to that algae.
Right.
So yeah, what can cause a rash? You know, how many thousand different things?
Yeah.
Right. Very difficult to pinpoint. But that was another part of the story was, is there a chemical in the pool that's causing this rash? Because I think actually the staff member was sampling upstream of the pool.
She was up at the upper part.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think so. My recollection from the Statesman, from the reporter, was that he was really on the trail of, you know, what the cause of the pollution might be, but he was looking really at the at old coal tar oil gasification plants.
Yeah.
And he was really focused on that, and he was like dead certain that that's what the cause of it was.
Right.
So he was looking for that, you know, and he was just kind of hammering that. And apparently, I think at some point he even said that there might be an old one may have been right up here.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And there was probably.
Well, there were some, and this was, you know, there were old coal tar plants that were in downtown Austin that had been uncovered as some of the big buildings began to go up in downtown Austin. They were finding some of that, and so it was sort of fresh in some of that consciousness. And, you know, but we're saying that there were probably coal gas plants all over town, and they looked over here where these apartments are now, and the old aerial photo showed an old borrow pit there where it was like, oh, well, see, this could have been an old site here. And it's like, well, kind of maybe, you know, but
it's far away from the city, you know.
Yeah, right. At that
point
point in time. But it was, you know, so it's interesting that all this was revolving around the same idea.
Yeah.
But it was what the mechanisms were that was getting it into the environment.
Yeah.
And then really what tack the reporting took. In my mind, it wasn't this sort of this level sort of, these are our options, these are the theories, let's look at them. You know, they came in full tilt, you know, with this is our theory and it's right. We've got experts from all over the country to say
it broke
you're wrong.
with that one story, that one day, that Sunday that it came out on the front page of was it the front page of the main paper?
I just happened to bring a copy of it today.
There you go.
Just to get your
Above the fold, as they say.
Yes,
And
right.
just to sort of make that point clear is that the coal tar gasification plants and the pavement sealant, the signatures on that, on the sampling protocol are
identical.
identical.
Yeah, are identical.
So,
So this is the Sunday paper, Above the Fold, January 19th, 2003. You guys,
Toxic chemicals, taint Barton Springs.
Yep.
Wow. Yep. So the key to this whole thing was that kind of like what David and Oscar were getting at, which is that Barton Springs was dangerous to people, that the values in it were alarming and toxic, basically.
Right.
At least they were proposing, and that they had a theory for exactly why.
But I think the enjoyment of that, if you want to call it that, was that, oh, this environmental icon that the city has gone through all this effort to protect and everything. Oh, this is going to kill people.
Yeah.
You know, if you swim in here, you're going to die.
Yeah.
And that was sort of I think there was some sort of, I feel like there's some sort of dark humor in some of what they were doing.
Right.
You know, to
kind of a gotcha.
Kind of
a gotcha thing, you know, like gotcha.
so what was, when this did come out, what was kind of, you know,
when you probably had a sense with all open record requests that something's coming, and you'd never really know until it comes out how it's going to be. You maybe had a sense, right? But what was when you opened this up in the good old days when everybody got a newspaper delivered, right, to your house? What was your response?
It was a shock.
Yeah,
it was a shock that it was not just a story, but they had pages and pages and pages and pages of stuff.
It was a full-on investigative report, like deep dive. Like you said, the theory was all laid out. There was maps showing where they were.
Yeah.
It was
pointing to the gasification.
Yeah, they had experts from around the country saying, well, it can be nothing other than coal tar.
The concentrations. They started saying that these numbers are high enough. It can't be cars. It has to be something concentrated.
More concentrated. Now, remember early on that Sunday, I remember my phone ringing. This was before cell phones, and it was the city manager calling and say, can you be at a meeting in my office at 1:00? I'm like, yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'll be there. And that kind of started getting everybody together so that everyone get on the same page and go, okay, this is what we're having. This is the problem that we're having, and we need everybody to focus, and we need everybody to
right.
Get in line.
Start working on this. But it was a shock that there was that much coverage of it.
I don't think anyone had any idea what they were going to come up with. Like you said, we knew that there was some interest and some concern about the pHs in the springs, but nothing like this.
And I think folks at our level too. I mean, there were probably some personality conflicts and politics behind all of this. There were maybe some of the ultimate drivers that folks at our level were not really aware of that was going on. But it was obvious that there was something going on that that was much bigger than us. Much bigger than that was driving.
Well,
this.
and I think also one thing was that when that came out, many of us had already spoken to the reporter, on many occasions. So we had been, there was this sort of dialogue going on between us and many of us and the reporter, and we did not know something like that was going to come out. Because we weren't on the sort of gasification trail there. We were kind of on the
trail,
pavement sealant trail. So
right.
When it came out, like you said, we were in shock. It's like, we did not see that one coming.
I went through the 20 banker boxes full of information that have been sort of this whole project from 2002 and testing before up to somewhat the present, and consolidating those files for the Austin History Center. And it's been an education for me because I wasn't around in 2003 when you guys did all that. But it was fascinating to see and watching how the city works, to see how much, like we were talking about, David, the city, you guys had done a lot of work leading up to that, but a lot of work got done in those 90 days. And I had come across a worksheet where Sharon Cooper was Oscar's manager, was tracking the time for everybody in the department, how much time they were spending on it. And it was,
I didn't know that.
It was a lot of time. And I think the one sheet I saw, there were 25 staff members at the time when the department was probably 60 people, or at least Watershed Protection Department was 60 people. There were 25 people dedicated and working on that during that time.
It was very reactive. It was just like David said, it was like, okay, everyone together, this is this big deal. And the reason it was so focused and I think effective is that we knew that we were very confident that it was wrong, that both the human health concerns were not legitimate and the sources were not accurate. So there was this very clear message from our kind of immediate managers: we need to document this. We need good science. We need to bring in all the health experts, because like David said, they had gone out and tagged certain experts from around the country, and we needed to find the other experts and bring them to the table. So there was a huge amount of work to demonstrate that it was not, whether it was or was not a human health risk, which was a big part of this, was more like consultation and experts. And then we also really wanted to clarify what is the source? And so there was two groups that were focused on those areas totally.
And there was a game plan. It was like, okay, it was just gradually chipping away at the BS that had come out in the media of what it was. Okay, you're gonna deal with, David, you're gonna deal with the whole landfill sort of thing. Where are these coal tar plants? That's your job. Mateo, you're gonna help kind of look at the tributaries. You're gonna help kind of refine this data. And we had experts, that volunteered to help us because they could see the BS in the argument that was in the paper at the time, and they volunteered to help. I mean, there were people that say, hey, we can help you with this, and so that was really comforting to know. But it was a tremendous amount of staff time, and I would hesitate to know how many dollars it cost the city to do that at the time.
It was stressful too.
And,
there was a lot of intense days and confusion and feeling really bad about the springs being shut down, feeling really bad that the city was being told that we were bad stewards of information and of science and of that we were hiding. And that's another thing. The article was really focused the fact that we knew this information, we were hiding it from the public.
Yeah, exactly. To pick up on David's point there is that the sort of word out in the public was that the city was hiding stuff and we weren't being straightforward with the public and stuff like that. And me being behind the scenes there, knowing that we were, everybody was being very diligent, very deliberate, very careful on everything we were doing, the sampling and all the investigation and everything. So that was comforting on my side, going like, I know what they're saying out there in the public with the paper, but what we're doing in here is we're being very, very careful in putting all the information out.
And we were all kind of on the same page with that. We all understood what was going on, and so it made it easier to go forward as a group to tackle that. And I think one of the things that we had to try and do was, the stories were laying us in bad light, that we were not collecting good data, it was not good science and all that. And so we brought in people with, impeccable reputations to help us with this, to help us kind of see through this problem. And that's where, Barb and Pete came into play and started to help us look at that and help us collect additional data and use the USGS laboratories, and not just the laboratories that we were sending our information, data to or sediment to get the data.
That was a huge shift, is they basically came in with a larger national view of this and basically orchestrated the science in a very clear and methodical way that helped bring us together.
Right. Wow. And kind of, maybe, jumping ahead a little bit, with their work starting to look at, okay, well, let's look at, are these parking lots a source? And going and, designing a plan to introduce water to these parking lots and collect the sediment and filter the sediment and send it to the labs, and having these parking lots from all over town that were both
different kinds of products.
Different kind of products. Through Tom's work, kind of trying to help us identify what some of these different products were, and finding that the parking lots with these coal tar sealants on them were indeed, orders of magnitude higher than what you get off of these other parking lots, and help us kind of get an idea of like, wow, this is it. I mean, this is a toxic waste is being applied to these parking lots legally, but it abrades off every few years from just use and wear and tear.
Washes off and then ends up in the creek.
And
so David would be the co-author of that first published paper demonstrating that runoff in 2005.
One thing I wanted to point out is that paper came out, I think, right before we went to council with the ban proposal.
Yes.
But a lot of the science that we did around this hadn't been published yet.
Yes.
Right.
And so I think that was the only paper that we were able to use at the actual ban.
And that was what council was after, was a peer-reviewed scientific journal published paper.
We had to go beyond the periodical nonsense. We had to have something that was pedigreed.
Yeah, I think the other thing that comes through to me is just like that phone call you got from the city manager. How many elected officials would trust their staff against national experts saying, hey, national expert says you've got a problem, I'm going to trust my staff? I've read the bios and know of the reputations of some of those national experts that the local paper used, and they're the experts in coal gasification waste facilities. So the fact that our leadership trusted us and we had built trust, that's amazing.
It could have been killed right there.
I think I think we had built a good reputation within the city management of the work that we had done over the years, and the things that we'd done related to Barton Springs, maybe specifically, but all the other work that our investigators had done as far as spills, our biologists had done as far as understanding what's going on in our urban water systems. But we had built that reputation within the city, and maybe that's part of our upper management also talking to their upper management to kind of help foster this. That hey, these are good. We have good people down here. They're doing good science. They've got good reputations.
Right.
And I think
that know what they're doing.
They know what they're doing, and
being out in the public, right? As city representatives, we were constantly sort of getting this barrage, and so for me, I know it was comforting to exactly, be able to trust all of my colleagues to say, I've seen these guys working. I know what they've been doing, and I'm behind them, 100%.
Yeah.
But so, it was also a time too where there had been a lot of environmental stuff that had been in the news over the previous decade, different issues that the city, and specifically what has become Watershed, was kind of deeply involved with. And so environment was still kind of a touchstone for a lot of community interest.
Right.
Defining kind of Austin's place.
Right. Austin's uniqueness, Austin's special, what makes it special.
Yeah, that's true.
You were saying earlier about the fragility of the springs and the concern and the concern facing the public. Some folks may not recognize that's kind of a departmental fear, or like stewarding this place. Nobody wants to be the person that was here when it got messed up, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on that for sure. I would say David is probably most acutely aware of that, just because of the groundwater connectivity and the study, all the work that went into understanding how Barton Springs kind of hydrogeologically works. But I do think that's why they closed it down so quickly. That's why there was a huge amount of energy and emotion in this. Was you saw the headline, right. Toxic waters. That was absolutely terrifying and deeply disturbing to conceive of that.
And I think too, maybe a component of this is the Barton Springs salamander had only been listed as an endangered species 6 years before, and there's all this. Some folks maybe felt overreaction to protection for this little species of salamanders that are 2 or 3 inches long, and I think this changed the focus to, and I think intentionally, to say, well, it's not the salamanders you should be worried about; it should be people. People are going to die if they go here.
Right.
And that was really the lightning rod.
That was the lightning rod.
And then my recollection also is, obviously the headline was shocking, but also that. The sample results that we were getting from the pool were really not sort of astronomically high, and people could have kept swimming if they wanted. There was really from the health department, I think they never really said you have to shut the pool down. That was something that was done
out of abundance of caution.
That
was the phrase.
Right.
So even though that was the headline, really people could have gotten in here and swam, and nothing would have happened to anybody, but that was the way we were operating.
Right.
We were like at a high, awareness level that, but nobody better get, a rash or anything out here.
I want to point out that that lead kind of breakthrough article came out, but then there was a series. There was articles that came out for the next couple of years. How long did that go? Maybe it was well after the 6 months, at least a year,
about a year probably.
where there would be a toxic waters top headline, and then another story pushing the gasification sources, pushing the human health risks, all this, and so it was like we were constantly being reintroduced to this trauma, and it would raise up everyone's, particularly management's, concern and focus, and it was very, very focused, like you said, Tom. It was very much like everyone was super engaged.
And it was interesting. At least my sort of data point on 2003 is when I arrived in 2005 to a group of people. I thought, well, this is compelling information. Let's get going. And it's like I you guys had just like marched across the desert.
We're done, Tom.
We figured it out, right? We're done. They're like, come on, there's more to do, right? Right. And so it's like, and just understanding the exhaustion of staff and seeing that sort of, stress, fatigue, if you will, on staff was pronounced even 2 years later.
Yeah, that's really
interesting observation. Yeah.
Because Nancy McClintock, I remember going to her after attending one of the meetings and said, man, what's going on here? It needs a shove.
Yeah.
Moving on from that, also then the pavement sealer ban, that was a big political hot potato,
Right. Right.
To go and present that, to council and, just bring it forward. That was
with the industry against us.
Right.
Yeah. That was a whole nother story.
Right.
with the whole industry, breathing down our backs on that,
Right.
So that took a lot of courage as well from management.
Yes.
And the trust that you were talking
Right.
about is like, we know we got our data here and we're going with it.
Yeah, we had at those meetings, the industry saying, well, your science is all wrong. They brought their scientists saying, oh no, wrong. So yeah, the discounting of the work
Intense
you
work.
folks had done was, it didn't stop. It intensified.
I remember there was one particular expert that was on coal tar that lived in Missouri. I was charged with sort of contacting him and trying to, get more information about it. I remember, several phone calls with him, and finally saying, "So have you ever been here? Have you ever been to the site? Have you ever looked at these areas that are these alleged coal tar plants?" Or anything? No. I was just sent some data to look at. So you've never really set foot here, but you're making some pretty strong statements. And he finally ended up saying, I don't really want you to call me anymore.
Right.
And I was like, okay.
Okay.
I see where you are.
That exchange is in the permanent record because I just read it.
Well, and one of the things too, thinking of exchanges in the permanent record, I remember thinking about the rash, and I remember there was an email I wrote, and I assume it was to Nancy, and I don't know who else was copied on it, but I remember something about how, this rash, what does it represent? Is there something in the water? Is this just the canary in the coal mine kind of a thing?
Right.
What a phrase made for a quote in the newspaper, and my email appearing in the newspaper. And that was one of those sort of lessons that I took of and I think that Nancy and others pushed on us is like, think about whatever you're doing, and before you hit that send button, it's like, what would this look like in print, in the newspaper?
That is a really good point. I think that did galvanize a certain level of caution and fear, and that our culture, our generation of staff really has, that you can't replicate that. The new people, not even new, relatively, who hadn't been through that kind of dynamic where the press is literally trying to get you, trying to, and when you made that quote, we didn't even know about it yet.
No, it was.
But that period definitely set up this entirely different dynamic about everything word you say can be twisted, everything you say can be taken out of context. Be really careful.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So how many of you were at the reopening?
I was.
April 19th.
I was. My whole family was here.
Yeah. So tell me, let's talk about that.
My wife taped and stitched all over her bathing suit were the stories from the newspaper, all over her bathing suit, and over the back of her suit, above her butt, was toxic waste. And I thought it was so clever and so unique. It wasn't a hugely attended event, but it was just sort of a sigh of relief. There were kids here. We had some music. They had an Easter egg toss in the shallow end of the pool with little kids, diving for Easter eggs and stuff. It was just sort of a, gosh, can we get back to normal?
Right.
Can we reclaim this place?
Yeah, right. Can we reclaim this? This is a good place to be.
And it had a very strong feeling of joy and celebration.
Okay.
It was really
relief, relief is like, I'm thinking like, why did we have to do all this?
Yeah, right. But that was just sort of an early sort of break, and like Mateo said, there was continuously stuff that we had to keep doing there over the next several years.
Yeah,
but
it was a milestone.
But you had the blessing of CDC, US EPA, and others that this place was.
It was a UT Health and Sciences, Health, what do they call it? UT Health.
Right, associated with MD Anderson as well.
Exactly.
So there were people with credentials or groups with credentials lining up behind us and with us, saying that what they're doing is accurate, and you're not gonna die if you go swimming in Barton Springs. You have a better chance of dying if you eat a hamburger every day for the rest of your life.
Right. And I like the quote that Dr. Fuchs Young said at the band meeting. She said, "These products are nothing but big buckets of carcinogens."
Yeah.
That's from a PhD person who studies cancer.
Right. That was sort of a wild event, and I think it really galvanized a lot of folks, but it really kind of helped show how much camaraderie and teamwork there was within that group of people at that time. That's something that I think should be lauded, and I think it's something that should be encouraged for the future too, because you never know when there's going to be something else like that happens, where everybody has to work together and everybody has to know that you've got my back and I've got your back. And
it's true. It was such a big bringing together of it's like that, you hear that cliche that people who go into battle together or do something really difficult together, they're never the same again. It brings you together in a way that just normal, less stressful everyday life doesn't.
Right, that's true.
And bringing a team like that together is not an automatic thing that everybody's going to coalesce around, whatever the subject is. So it takes a little bit of, there's dynamics there, social dynamics and personalities and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's just trusting who you're working with, right? It's like, I know what he's doing. He's dotting his I's and crossing his T's, so I'm with him. And same thing with everybody else, having that trust that everybody's doing the best that they can do, and that goes a lot to creating that team, where everybody's kind of working together.
Right.
Yeah. So fast forwarding a little bit to add to the celebration, by December 2005, Mateo testifies before Congress, right?
Yep. It was a congressional
briefing, right, about what we found in December 2005. The ban went into effect in January 2006. David's paper is published with USGS, of course, in mid 2005.
Tom was a principal co-author on that.
Yep.
Right.
On the Shire.
And that, ironically, the creek upstream where it was you and Tom walked is now named after Tom. And some of you may not have seen that even Congressman Doggett made a proclamation honoring Tom after he passed away in 2011. And now we're at bans across the United States. There's 50 million Americans under a coal tar sealant ban. In about 17 to 20 states. Canada is considering a nationwide ban right now, and that's the Canadian process is completely different. Their quote unquote legislature says if you find something that meets this criteria, you run it through this process. And so we found this thing, and we're just running it through the process, and it's almost like it's on a conveyor belt. It doesn't matter who complains or how loud you are. It's in the hopper, and it's moving through. So it's at a 4-year process, and so it's they will have a decision, I think, by this fall.
Wow. By
their own findings, is it entering the environment that can in a concentration that can hurt people and the environment? And their answer is yes, and that's the sole criteria. If you answer that yes, then you get rid of it. Anything else you guys like to?
I mean, I've got a recollection in my mind when we were in a meeting and, we had done all this work, and Nancy was there, you guys were there, and we had finally kind of come to the decision that, this is it. These pavement sealers, we're doing it. We're going to go forward. We're going to tell the world this is what it is. And just sort of that realization right there, and I looked over at Nancy and go, "You're going to go ahead and drop the pebble in the pond, aren't you?" And that's what it was, that meeting right there, when I said that decision was made. And then like, all right, let's see where it goes.
But I and I think too, it was collective teamwork. And I think that's really important, because I think there are things that I've seen since then where things are a little bit more compartmentalized.
Right.
with the way things are problems are approached and tackled. And I think that's a mistake because you miss some of the perspectives that other disciplines may bring in, or even just other individuals. This was a team effort all the way, and everybody pulling weight, maybe not more weight than somebody else or anything, but everybody was pulling weight. Having that team effort, I think, is really critical for that kind of issue.
It was mostly our division, but we pulled people from everywhere. And like you said, some people were more deeply engaged, some people were less so, but it was very much this kind of unifying group of people that all saw this path that we needed to get.
And then it's in a lighthearted moment, our education folks making fun of the Statesman, one of the Statesman stories about Barton Springs as the toxic waste dump. It's a super fun site. And they came up with this using the old style stuff and saying it is a super fun site.
That's right.
And I really thought that was clever, and I thought it was so, it was an easy, simple little gesture, but I thought, thank you.
Yep.
And those were introduced at the day that the Barton Springs opened up again. So that was part of the joy. Yeah,
Right.
having those.
They had fans, right?
Yeah, and the fans.
Fans with that on there, right?
That's
I
true.
wish I had one of those.
I may have one at home. I'll have to see if I have two.
Ed Peacock has one.
Does he?
Yep. So anyway, Ed couldn't be with us today.
Yeah,
for
there's a
some
lot
reason.
of folks who were involved with this. I wish were here right now.
Yep. So thanks guys for doing that.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you.